Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to CoachX Conversations from the Institute of Coaching. My name is Jeff Hull. I'm the Executive Director at the Institute of Coaching, and I am very excited to have with me here today Natasha Bowman, who is a thought leader and a new friend of the Institute of Coaching in the space of mental wellness, mental health wellness, and especially this month, we had World Mental Health Wellness Day just about a week ago or a few days ago. And this topic is certainly prevalent and relevant to all of us these days as we come out of the pandemic. And I am really excited that at the Institute of Coaching, we will be kicking off our very first asynchronous sort of downloadable virtual course on mental health literacy for coaches, starting on November 15th, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I am just really excited to have this topic be on our radar and with a real expert in the house to talk about why building wellness and healthy mental health cultures in organizations is so important. So please take a minute and just say hello. We like to see who's joining us and where you're from. We will try to get to as many of your questions as we can in the next few minutes. But let me just start by sharing a little bit about our special guest. So Natasha Bowman is an acclaimed champion for workplace equity. She was named one of the top 30 global gurus in management and a top 200 voice in leadership and a LinkedIn top voice for mental health. She's written 2 books, has done a number of TEDx talks. She's a Forbes contributor. And probably most importantly, she's the president of a New York City-based leadership development firm called Performance Renew. She's also just kicked off in the last year a nonprofit called the Bowman Foundation for Workplace Equity and Mental Wellness. And her personal passion is creating healthy work environments for everyone through her foundation, regardless of the employer's ability to fund DEI initiatives. She's truly committed to changing lives and saving lives by advocating for psychologically safe and healthy work cultures. We were privileged at the Institute of Coaching to have Natasha with us about a month ago, I think, for a webinar. Everyone loved it. It was super helpful in terms of her techniques, her tips, and her background in mental health to really support coaches as we become more literate in what we need to know when we have those kinds of issues come up in the workplaces where we're working with leaders, working for employees, working with people. And so I am really excited to have you here, Natasha. I'm noticing that we're having people coming from all over.
Wow.
So just saying hello to folks from Minnesota and from, oh my God, from India, from Boston, from Tennessee, Amsterdam. So welcome everyone. Put your questions in the chat box as we go along. And I just want to welcome Natasha. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And hello, everyone from across the globe. Good to see you.
It's always so nice to have the audience come from all over the world because this is
Yes.
seriously a globally focused issue. Mental health in the workplace and in general is just, I would say, no, it's not only important, but what's really important is that it's kind of coming out of the closet in terms of
Yes.
coming out of the pandemic, going through obviously difficult economic and political environments.
Mhm,
People really need to be able to share their stories and to get
mhm,
support. And that's
mhm.
what we do as coaches.
Yeah.
So I want to start, Natasha, by asking you, if you're okay with it, to share a little bit of your own personal journey, because I think it really is so crucial for people to understand that you didn't just sort of drop into this topic. You
Yes.
have a
Yes.
personal connection.
Absolutely. If 3 years ago, if you would have told me I would be a global mental health advocate, I would not have believed you. I've always believed in creating healthy and psychologically safe work environments. But mental health means something different now that I've had a lived experience. So prior to 2020, As you stated, I guess you can say I checked off every professional accomplishment that I possibly could, and had so many things on the horizon for that year. And like everyone else, my world came to a pause in March of 2020. And all of my speaking engagements were canceled, my client projects were placed on hold, and I guess my brain did not know how to abstain from working. While everybody else kind of enjoyed the pause, I didn't so much, and I experienced a mental health crisis during COVID, that led to a very, very deep depression, a suicide attempt, and an inpatient
Mm.
hospitalization in a mental health facility. And it was while I was hospitalized that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It explained a lot. My mental illness really had not, throughout my lifetime, gone through down a dangerous or destructive, what we typically think when we think about mental illness, what we've been kind of wired to think. It actually fueled a lot of my success, the ability to work on multiple projects at the same time. I didn't need sleep. I was always on this kind of high, if you will. I realized that I was always in some sort of bipolar manic episode, which was not usual. I thought it was. I thought I was kind of a superwoman, but I wasn't. I was sick. And so after I was discharged from the hospital, as you can imagine, I was really, I stigmatized myself and limited myself as to what my capabilities were. Would I be credible? And really suffered with sharing what I had experienced. But after several months of research about mental illness and learning about people who continue to be successful and thriving by following the right treatment plan, I decided, as you said, to come out and disclose my mental health condition and what I had experienced. And more importantly, because I have such a connection to the workplace, really become an advocate for cultivating cultures of mental wellness at work and destigmatizing it and creating a safe space for people like me who have a mental health condition or may be diagnosed for one in the future.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story because I think it breaks the narrative that so many of us have historically in our culture,
Mhm.
that someone who has a mental health issue is going to be immediately noticeable, right? They're going to be someone who went to a special school or was
Yep.
treated for X, Y,
Mhm.
and Z
Mhm.
mental, whatever form it's
Mhm.
called. But the
Mhm.
reality is that the statistics show that the vast majority of people, it's something like
Yes.
80% of
Yes.
us, will experience a mental health issue and maybe even a mental health crisis like the one you
Mhm.
described at
Mhm.
some point during their career. So
Absolutely.
even people that are super achieving can actually be caught off guard by
Mhm.
life's, disruptions,
Yep.
by loss,
Mhm.
by illness.
Yep.
And that can lead to, as you said, can lead to depression. It can lead to
Mhm.
episodes that are truly historically something that we don't want to discuss in the workplace.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is really key for coaches to be aware of,
Mhm.
that they may be sitting across the table from someone that's very successful on
Yeah.
one level,
Exactly.
but they want to dig in deeper. They want to look for
Exactly.
what is the physical, mental, and emotional history and
Right.
story. So tell us a little bit about what you have created in terms of the type of tool set, because
Yeah.
coming out of that experience, you've also not only just breaking the taboo of talking about it, but your foundation and your firm are committed to
Yeah.
helping companies with tools. Talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. And I loved, from a coaching standpoint, to be able to identify if someone may be experiencing a mental health crisis, burnout, which we now know is a medical condition,
Mhm.
and so with that being said, I found it after my discharge from the hospital. My husband and I co-founded a nonprofit, the Bowman Foundation for Workplace Equity and Mental Wellness. And we are using this nonprofit to cultivate these cultures of mental wellness for organizations, for individuals. And through our work, we created a framework called the C.A.R.E Model. That as a coach myself, I'm thinking about how I typically coach clients and what they can do, especially as they're helping managers to navigate through conversations with their teams about mental health, which are very tough and challenging conversations to have,
Right.
right? Especially if you haven't been approached by someone, but you notice a change in their behaviors at work. And it's so important to understand that that change doesn't necessarily, and this was something that I didn't know, but I was experiencing, that change doesn't have to necessarily be a negative change. Again, I think we look for those signs of depression. We look out for call outs and things like that, but we don't look for the overachieving. You know, if someone all of a sudden is overproductive, you're getting emails from them at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they seem to be on this, kind of high. That could be a sign that they're
Right.
experiencing some sort of crisis. So with this framework, the care, which is called the C.A.R.E Model, and that's an acronym.
Right.
When you're going through these coaching conversations and you're coaching your managers on how to have these discussions, the C is for concern. Just show concern, being able to identify a change of behavior. Again, whether it's they're not acting, they're acting more down, they're calling out, they're not as engaged as they typically are, or perhaps they're super engaged, looking for those types of things, or just
Right.
observing the work environment, your outside environment, just showing concern about people's mental health. Oftentimes, we've been told as managers, and I was guilty of this as a labor and employment law attorney, as HR. Someone comes to you like, don't have that conversation. You don't want
Right.
to know anything
Avoid
about
it.
right. You want to know. You don't want to know because you may make a decision based on that. But we haven't been equitable about that, because if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and they're excited, you get excited for them and you dig further. Well, how far along are you? Do you want a boy or a girl? You get excited and you check on them. If someone comes and says that they've been diagnosed with cancer, we show that concern, that empathy. We want to engage. We're how are you doing? What is your treatment plan, et cetera, et cetera. But with mental illnesses, we haven't really engaged in that type of dialogue. So showing that concern by saying, let's talk about it, and hearing out, or expressing your concern if you haven't been approached, to say, you seem different, right? And that's whether it's underproductive, overproductive, whatever it may be. And then that A is awareness. Being aware, you just gave a great statistic that 80% of people at work are going to experience some sort of mental health crisis somewhere down the line. In COVID 25, the number of people who were diagnosed with a mental health condition increased by 25%. So that means that 1 in 4 people have a
Right.
diagnosed mental health condition. So I want you to think about your teams, think about the people you coach. 1 in 4 of them have been diagnosed. So that awareness around mental health conditions are not taboo. It's not out of the ordinary, being aware of the different types of mental health conditions, how they show up at work, et cetera, is great, because as we know, when it comes to bias, the more that we learn about something, the more comfortable we are with it, right?
Right.
So that awareness around mental health conditions. And then the R is for reflection, right? So think about the resources that you have available at your organization, the resources you can give your coaches, et cetera, your coaching clients, et cetera, that will help them to be able to provide the support that is needed for their teams, right? Through the people that are experiencing this. So, what resources are available? And expanding upon that, really auditing that, ensuring that those resources are adequate. What we've learned through our research is that we don't have adequate resources to support the mental health of our employees, so ensuring that you have that toolkit that's available. And then the E is for empathy. Put
Mm.
yourself in that person's shoes
Right.
and think about, what would I need in terms of support, guidance, et cetera, in order to be successful at this job, right? And understand when someone's approaching you that they're not necessarily telling you what they can't do. And I think a lot of managers go to that place. It's, oh, wow, they're going to ask me for time off. They're going to do this. Know that they are capable, competent, and probably confident. They can continue to meet or exceed the expectations of their role, but that getting there, that pathway may look different, right? So that's so important that we go into this with an optimistic attitude when we're entering these conversations, and not going to how is this going to negatively impact the organization or our relationship, but going into it as this is a competent, capable person that I'm confident will be able to succeed with my support.
That's great. Yeah, it's really, really important that as coaches, we have this framework that we can share with the potential, with the clients or with the HR department or with
Mhm.
leaders, but
Yep.
also to do some reflecting of our own development, right?
Yep.
And think
Hmm.
about we're human too. We've
Yep.
had our ups and downs. We
Yep.
may have had a big loss during COVID. We may have felt isolated. So think about how we felt during that time. And I think most
Yes.
importantly, when you're talking about empathy and resources, ask ourselves, what did we do? What did we
Hmm.
do to get support? A lot of the time we turn to our friends, we turn to our families, we have
Hmm.
coaches. So I think it's really important that as
Hmm.
coaches, we become cognizant of the fact that this could be going on anywhere in any
Yes.
of the environments.
Yes.
So I
Absolutely.
want to encourage folks to, we have a few minutes here, so drop a question
Yeah,
in the
I'm
chat
looking at
box.
that, you
If
know.
you have anything you want to ask Natasha, now's the time to do it.
So
So,
Danielle, that you asked about, is there the public record in the U.S. of how many people are classified as mentally ill? When I say mental health condition, that's another word for mentally ill, and it's
right,
1 in 4 people. So we're talking about millions. I think it's upward of 1.5 million or so, or maybe even more than that. But it's millions of people in the U.S. who have been diagnosed with a mental health condition. So again, the number is staggering. And as someone else said in the comments, and that's only what we know. That's
right,
the
right,
diagnosed people. That's
right.
not people that have not been diagnosed.
I'm curious because you are a lawyer by training and you've worked with HR. I
Hmm.
was earlier in my career an HR director. And I
Hmm.
know that as compassionate as most HR professionals are,
Hmm.
they're always they tend to be very hesitant to get into this
Yes.
space. So
Yes.
give us some tips. If I was a coach hired through HR to work with a
Mhm.
client and I noted that there might be a potential challenge, maybe depression,
Mhm.
maybe addiction. You never know what you're going to run
Yep.
into.
Yep.
What do you suggest to support the HR professional to be
Yeah.
able to kind of deal with those topics and taboos? What do you suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they can certainly still follow that care model that I talked about. But I think HR has to rethink the way that we've been handling mental health in the workplace. And I know in my experience being head of HR for several organizations, we pretty much outsourced it. If someone came to us, it was call EAP, your employee assistance program, call, your workforce health and safety,
Right,
or whatever that is, and we did not engage. It was again that hands off approach. But now that I thought about it, you can't. This is a cultural issue, and so you can't outsource culture, right? You can't outsource civility, respect, and engaging in these conversations, right? Because someone sitting outside of your organization, they don't know the culture of your organization. They don't know the
right.
players. They don't know the this. It's like, here's a job description. Can they do it or not? We've got to stop that. We've got to be more proactive about having the conversations, ensuring that there's resources. And that's what I've been coaching a lot of HR professionals. In fact, my foundation rolled out a workplace mental health certification for HR professionals.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yes, and through that, we talk about auditing, looking at your benefits, your time off. Are there enough mental health providers in network to support your staff? A lot of times we think, oh, we're giving medical benefits, they're good to go. That's not the case. When I was
Right.
first noticing a change in my behavior, I could not find someone within my insurance network that was accepting new patients.
Mm,
So I had to pay out of pocket. We're talking upwards of $300 an hour in order to receive help. And most people don't have that to spare. So what happens? You go untreated. So doing that medical benefits audit to make sure you have enough ratio to mental health providers. What are the cultural differences of the mental health providers? I have already experienced during my mental health experience bias from a
Right.
mental health provider that I had to change providers because they weren't culturally competent. So looking at those types of things is key for HR leaders, because we can no longer just outsource it and say, oh, we have EAP, we have insurance, and that's enough. We've actually got to audit and pay attention to what we have. Ask people, if they've tried to, what's been their
Right.
experience, and make sure that we are, really as an HR profession, providing those resources that we can as an organization.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I would add that one of the things that I do with my clients when I'm interacting with the HR business partner is that I always
Mhm,
bring up the topic of wellness and what they're doing for their organizations around
mhm,
wellness. And
mhm.
usually they're very committed to wellness programs, wellness initiatives.
Yes.
But then I'll ask them, so health wellness is both a mental and emotional and a
Mhm.
physical topic. Are you addressing all three? What are
No.
the ways that you're approaching? Exactly. So that's
Step
another way,
challenges, yoga, that's good. That's great. We need those things, but that's
right?
not like you get a comprehensive wellness program.
Right. No. So I have a great Laura has a great question. As
Okay.
coaches and managers, do we have to wait for the client to volunteer their concern about their mental health? And if I think she's implying, what would
Mhm.
you do if you were the coach and you recognize there may be something going on?
Yeah, absolutely. And my first time really experiencing or paying attention to for my coach's mental well-being was during the pandemic. I was helping them to navigate through so many unprecedented challenges that they had never experienced before as organizational leaders. Dealing with race relations here in the US was big during
Right.
COVID. I'm in New York City, so there's a lot of grief and death. And so at that point, I'm helping them to navigate through those things. And I finally paused. I knew I wasn't okay. I didn't tell them that, but to ask them, are you okay?
Are you
And then
okay? Yeah.
yes, and then I started to pivot, to talk about, well, what are you doing to prevent burnout for yourself and for your team? How are you creating boundaries? What are you doing to address isolation? So we started to pivot that conversation. And that was the first time in my coaching career that I really paused and really formulated those questions around my clients on mental and emotional well-being. But I'm sure that conversation is not going to change, although we are past some of those initial challenges that COVID presented. I think that's something that needs to be integrated for every coach. Although you may
Right.
be hired to address a performance issue or to develop someone for the next level, ensure that you're also, no matter what your underlying coaching theme that you're integrating the emotional and mental well-being into your coaching model.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it connects with a question that came in from a user about, or he said it just says LinkedIn user, so I'm not sure who
I
it
know.
is,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
it's not their name.
Not their name.
I'm saying LinkedIn user is asking a
Right,
great
right,
question.
right, right.
Anyway, the question was whether or not, well, I've lost it.
Oh,
Uh, Oh, when the client may be less aware. Like if you're the coach and you're
mhm,
recognizing that there may be, like you pointed in your situation, real high highs or low
yep.
lows.
Mhm, mhm,
When you, as the coach, notice that situation or notice that something may not be,
mhm,
um, the person may not be
mhm,
thriving, but they're
mhm.
not as aware of it. What are some of the
Yeah.
tips you would give to, because obviously you're not going to just say to your client, oh, I think you have a mental health issue. I
No,
mean,
and,
that's
and don't do that at all. Never say that. Never
right. No, of course not.
apologize. We are
Right.
not
That's the
mental health
extreme. So what
professionals.
would you suggest though?
Yeah. So, but I do think it's okay going back to that care model to show concern and say,
Right.
I've been with you, coaching you for a year or however long it's been. And typically you're this way, and describe what that looks like. I've noticed in our past couple of sessions, you appear to be different.
Mm.
Again, going back to that key statement, that key question, is everything okay? And a lot of times when you open that door,
Yeah.
people will step in it. They just need the door to be open. They don't want to do it themselves.
They need to feel safe, right?
Exactly. You need to feel safe. I'm concerned about you. This those questions, and that's what I'm here for. You're in that safe space. That's why I'm here to coach you through not only some of these, typical things that we've talked about, but to support your emotional and mental well-being. And I am concerned. And that may be the hardest thing as a coach that you can say, because we've been programmed and wired to stay on such a strict path or whatever. But to say I'm concerned about you, and say it in an empathetic way, they will in the long run appreciate it coming from you, so they can
Right.
address the issue before it impacts the way that they work and the conversation goes differently, with their organization, right? So
Yep.
although it may be uncomfortable to you, I think it's our obligation, to express our concern if there's a need to.
I love that because I think what you're pointing to is that a coach can enter that dynamic with empathy and concern and compassion, but not judgment. And
Yep.
I think that's what we really
Mhm.
as coaches need to be aware of is be watching if we have an internal judgment
Mhm.
tone, because
Mhm.
that can actually make your client feel unsafe, which is
Exactly.
exactly the opposite of what you're intending.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
there's a great question from Aaron, and I think given that you're a lawyer and your track in your
Mhm.
background, this would be
Mhm.
perfect one for us to probably begin to wrap up. But
Okay.
what do you suggest when the employer is reluctant
Yeah.
to talk about these issues or address
Yeah,
them?
and we're still navigating through that. These conversations are still very, very new.
Right,
Prior to the COVID pandemic, we weren't having these conversations. They weren't being introduced at all. So this is a fairly new concept to talk about, or to talk to organizations about the mental and emotional well-being of their employees. And I think to open that door, people love data, organizational leaders love data. We've got to go in there with that data and say, are you
right,
aware that there's been a 25% of people, that have been diagnosed with a mental health condition? So let's look at what that looks like for your workforce, right? So if you've got 100 people, 25 of those have been diagnosed with a mental health condition. And talk about how specific mental health conditions can impact the way that they work, right? So making that business case, and I hope one day, we've been saying business case for years. I hope one day we don't have to say business case.
it's a
And
human
people,
case, right?
yeah, that's a human case. I love that. We can make that we're able just to articulate the human case. But there is research and data out there that shows that if you don't address the mental health of employees, how it impacts the bottom line, right? It impacts your productivity.
Good
We
point.
talk about this new term of quiet quitting. I always say quiet quitting is indicative of there's an issue with your workplace culture. So addressing that. So there's it's going to impact your bottom line. And hopefully they will also just see it as an issue of humanity. Why would you want people walking around
Right,
sick? Right.
right.
So again, I don't have a black and white answer, because again, this is all very, very new. And
But I
so,
think you're raising key
mhm,
points, which is bring data
yeah,
and remind the HR folks or the leaders that you're working with that it impacts the bottom line, and
yeah,
so it's finding that, weaving that delicate line between recognizing the importance of a business bottom
mhm,
line
yeah,
and also that your business is made up of people
yep,
and the people have to thrive or the business isn't going to
exactly,
thrive.
exactly,
So, yeah, no,
exactly.
beautifully said. One last quick comment in case you have any thoughts, because this is going to be something addressed in our mental health literacy
Mhm, mhm.
course. But what is your, quick approach to this question that comes up for coaches about how to navigate the distinction between therapy and coaching?
Yeah, I saw that in comments. I was like, I
Yeah.
just had to type it in later. And for those who didn't get a chance to, I'll come back later on today and jump in those comments and share my
Okay,
thoughts.
that'd be great.
Right. But I think, at some point there is a line of demarcation, because if you feel as if, okay, I am not coaching you on performance, et cetera, what you've been hired to do and what you've been trained to do and certified to do, and that you've gone beyond that, you have to let the client know at this point,
Right.
I can't diagnose you, I can't pathologize you. I can recommend, though, that you talk to a licensed mental health
Exactly.
professional, right? So I've shown my concern, I've told you what my observations are. If they agree with that, then that's when you make the recommendations, and make it very clear, right, during your coaching that I want to bring this up to you. I can't help you with these particular issues. I'm not a mental health professional, but I can tell you from a behavioral perspective and my observation that I believe that you could benefit from help of a mental health professional.
And then you
Have
can
to
make a
keep that line.
referral with
Exactly.
referrals.
Right. Or
Right.
just tell them to engage with their organization to see, what's out there,
Right.
that's being provided for them or whatever. But we have to be very, very careful, right? We don't want to engage in the unlawful activity of practicing medicine. And again, we're not licensed professionals to
Right.
do this. So
But we
to
can
make
look
that very
for support. We can help with
exactly.
support, referrals. So
Exactly.
we're coming up on our time. I would
Oh,
love to have you for another hour, but I want to thank you so much for Natasha for taking that. This is such an important topic, and you're doing such amazing work with your foundation.
thank
And I
you.
encourage everyone to go on our website. If you're a member of the Institute of Coaching, you can watch the webinar in which Natasha goes into much more detail.
Mm.
And I would also really encourage everyone to join us tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern time for our webinar discussing these issues in more depth with a panel of experts, and also to look for our course that's coming your way in early November. The mental health literacy course for coaches is something we at the Institute of Coaching are super excited about. And you can find out all the information you need to sign up and register for the course at the website instituteofcoaching.org. So thanks again, Natasha. It's always a
Thank you
pleasure
for
to talk to
having
you.
me. All
And
right.